Hello guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Hit the bell icon button so that you don't miss out any tutorial.
In this lesson, we'll take a look at various terms that are used in Excel. So like all other areas of computers and fields of study, spreadsheets have their own language. And the listing of some common terms is provided here to serve as a reference for you when working with spreadsheets. And also in all practicality, when you're essentially working with the program itself, you ought to know these terms from the exam point of view, or otherwise if you're talking to a colleague and certain Excel terms are mentioned, then you need to know what those terms are and what to do with them. Okay, so I've compiled some of the basic fundamental Excel terms that are so common that every time you work with Microsoft Excel, you'll keep hearing these terms and over and over again. Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to explain the term itself, and then I'll also show you what that does and what that means. So first is the cell. The intersection of a column and row is basically called the cell, and all information is stored in a cell. So for instance, this particular is a cell. Okay, so here's a column called A and a row called 1. So the intersection of column and row is known as a cell. Okay, so Excel labels this by saying it's A1. So if I click anywhere else, for instance A5, Excel up here in the name box, and we'll take a look at what that is, tells me that my current position is A5. So similarly, I can click on any other cell and it highlights both the column part and the row area. So I know it's column B and row 7. Okay, so cell is the intersection of column and row. Cell pointer is similar to the word processing's insertion point. It selects or marks the current cell or where the next activity is going to take place. So here's my cell pointer. So if I point to any cell and I click on it, it takes me to that particular cell. Cell references are the addresses, which consist of columns and row IDs of a specific cell. So a cell reference identifies the location, a cell or group of cells in a spreadsheet. So a cell reference consists of the column letter and the row letter and the row number that intersect at the cell's location. And please note that when listing a cell reference, the column letter is always listed first. So like here, for example, it's always A5. So the column is always first and then followed by the row. Okay, let me move on to the next term here. Formula. So what is a formula in Excel? It's used to instruct Excel to perform a calculation of numbers entered in a cell or numbers entered in other cells, referred to by cell references. So all formulas begin with an equal sign, and that's important. So in Excel, every time you need to create a formula or perform some calculation, you must start with an equal sign. So for example, here's a basic formula. You start off with an equal sign. You give a cell reference A3. In other words, the data in A3 minus the data or information contained in C6. And here's the division sign, and that's on your keyboard as well. D2. Okay, so that's one way to write a formula. Or another way to write the formula using the mathematical law of operations is to say equal sign, parentheses, B4 plus B5, and this is a multiplication sign, or called the asterisk. That's also on the keyboard. E7. So a simple formula. Again, we'll take a look at these formulas and additional formulas a little later, but right now just the concept of what a formula is. Okay. Next is the function. A function is a pre-programmed formula. Okay, so the difference between formula and function is that formulas are used to perform calculations of numbers and functions are pre-programmed formulas. So the function will perform the calculation based on the cells that are referenced in the function. All functions begin with the equal sign, and a function is nothing but a preset formula. So for example, like formulas, functions in Excel begin with an equal sign followed by the function's name and its arguments. The function name tells Excel which calculation to perform. The arguments are contained inside or around brackets and tell Excel what data or other information to use in that particular calculation. So for example, the sum function is one of the most commonly used functions in Excel. It is used to add together the data in selected cells. The sum function is written as equal sign, the word sum, parentheses, and then followed by the range of cells like D1 colon D6, which means all the way from column D1 down to D6. So just so you understand the concept of formula and then the function itself. And these functions, our formulas are under the menu called formulas. So if I click on the menu here, notice here are all the formulas in various categories. Okay. So I can click on insert function, for example, which will insert the function. Or I can use any of these other categories. I can click on the recently used, and these are all the functions, which are pre-programmed formulas. Okay, so just so you know. All right. Next is the label. The term label is a cell that contains text or a combination of numbers and text, or only numbers that cannot be used in a calculation. So labels cannot be used for calculations. So in other words, it's just text. So if you'd like to, let's say, create a heading for your table in Excel, or label some numbers in a different cell, you could do so. Next is a column. Column is simply a vertical group of cells within a spreadsheet, just like I mentioned earlier. So column A, column B, column C, and so forth. Range is a group of cells. Ranges are often referenced for formulas, printing, and for designating a group of information to be copied or cut. Ranges can be selected by dragging, or sometimes called painting over the cells. So we can use the mouse or the keyboard or a name box, and a number of cells can be selected to create a range. Commands executed by Excel will affect the entire range. So as an example of a range of an adjacent cells would be B5 to D10. Or in this particular example that I'm going to demonstrate, I'm going to select cell A1 by holding down my mouse button and simply dragging my mouse across to column B and then down to, let's say, 15. Okay, so now I have selected cells A1 through B15 as part of my range. Okay. So range is just a group of cells, and I can also select the range using my keyboard. So for instance, my first cell where I would like to begin selection of the range, the next step is to hold the shift key down on my keyboard and use the arrow keys to navigate down or across depending upon my own requirement. So I can go all the way down to 15. Okay, just remember that you have to hold the shift key down while you're selecting a range on your keyboard. Next is the sheet, a layer of the spreadsheet. Excel spreadsheets can have multiple sheets, and this can be helpful if you want one spreadsheet that contains the gradebooks, for example, for all the sections that you teach, and each section can be on a separate sheet. So for instance, down here where you see terminology 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, these are all individual sheets, okay, within this particular workbook. Value is just a number in that cell that can be used in Excel calculation. So for example, in cell A1 here, I type 5 and hit enter on my keyboard, for example. Now there's a value of 5 in cell A1. Active cell is the cell surrounded by a black border. The black border is referred to as the active cell highlight. So right now my active cell is A1. If I click in A5, my active cell would be A5. Workbook is simply a spreadsheet program that you create in Excel. So every time you open an Excel, every time you open Microsoft Excel, it creates a blank workbook for you. So a workbook contains worksheets of rows and columns in which you can enter and calculate data. So here's my sheet 1, and then I can navigate to different sheets. Okay? So all of these sheets are part of one workbook. Worksheet, on the other hand, is the primary document that you use in Excel to store and work with data. And this is also called a spreadsheet. So a worksheet consists of cells that are organized into columns and rows. A worksheet is always stored in a workbook, a collection of cells that is grouped on a single layer of the spreadsheet, and a workbook is a collection of worksheets, just like I mentioned earlier. Workspace file, a file that saves display information about open workbooks so that you can later resume work with the same window sizes, print areas, screen magnification, and display setting. So a workspace file doesn't really contain the workbooks themselves. Okay, so there's just a file that displays information about multiple workbooks. Our last few terms are fill handle. This is a small black square in the lower right corner of the selection. When you point to the fill handle, the pointer changes to a black cross. Okay, so for instance, notice if I am in cell A1 here and I go to the lower right corner of the selection, it changes into a cross or a plus sign. Okay, so if I move away, my pointer changes. If I go to the lower right corner of the active cell, it changes into a cross or a plus sign. Okay, so this is known as the fill handle, and what this does is basically copies the content of the active cell into different cell by dragging, and I'll demonstrate that in subsequent lessons. Okay, but for right now, just the concept of what a fill handle is. And then we have scroll bars, horizontal and vertical scroll bars that appear on the bottom and right side of the worksheet window, which enable you to quickly move to a different area of a worksheet. So on the right side, notice here is my scroll bar, which I can scroll up and down, and another scroll bar on the bottom where I can scroll left and right. Okay, so a couple of scroll bars that are available. The default startup workbook, as mentioned earlier, the new unsaved workbook that's displayed when you start Excel. So every time you open up Excel, the default startup workbook would open. And last is the row, which is simply the horizontal group of cells within a spreadsheet. So again, rows are numbered and columns are alphabets. So I wanted to cover the basic Excel terminology or the spreadsheet terminology so that you're comfortable working with. As we move forward in these lessons, I'm going to be using these terms frequently. Okay, so practice with these terms, and let's move to our next lesson. In this lesson, we'll take a look at the Excel interface. Okay, so for instance, when you open up, this is what you will see. Okay, as a program itself. We talked about the ribbon in the previous lesson. Okay. But briefly, I want to start with the ribbon itself again, which is again quickly a set of tools in various groups. So for instance, the font group here contains a set of related tools that you can use to change formatting within your Excel environment. Okay? And then the alignment group has its own set of tools and so forth. So the ribbon is where all the tools are. Here's the menu. So home, insert, for example, menu, page layout. Each menu once again has its own ribbon with its own set of related tools. So we know where the menus are. We know what a ribbon is, okay, as far as the Excel interface is concerned. Notice the File menu is a little different from the rest of the menus, plus the color is different also. So if I click on the File menu, for example, it takes me to a whole set of new options, okay? And this is known as the backstage view. So, and this arrow will take me back to my Excel workbook, okay? So once again, if I click on File, it takes me to the backstage view where I have an option such as New, Save, Print, Sharing, Export, or Open Documents. Since it's a cloud-based program, it offers several new features such as OneDrive, where I can upload and save documents online, or open up documents from other web locations from my existing computer, and I can also add other online places. Okay, but for now, just the backstage view in Excel, where I can use the print, save, and options, account options, and so forth. And if I click on the arrow, it takes me back to the Excel workbook. Okay. So the rest of the menus show tools on the ribbon. Okay. On the left side, notice there's a small toolbar. Okay. This is known as the Quick Access toolbar. And all that is simply the same set of tools, but you can customize this Quick Access toolbar and place those tools that you use frequently. So you don't have to navigate from one menu to the other and start finding these tools, for example. You can simply place them on the Quick Access toolbar and use them easily and quickly. Okay. So this is known as the Quick Access toolbar. Under the ribbon, we have the name box. Okay, this is known as the name box. So whichever cell, for example, my active cell is D4, the name box will show me my cell location. So if I click anywhere on the workbook, all I have to do is just look up to my name box, and then it will display a name. By default, Excel uses the column and the row and places M5 as being the column and row. I can also give it a name. So for instance, if I like to call this cell something else, or a group of cells, so if I select a range, for example, of cells here, and I like to give these cells a name, I can simply type in a name in this name box. Next to the name box, we have the formula bar. Okay. This is where you can either create the formula, you can type the formula, or if a cell has an existing formula, it will display it right here. And I can always enter or cancel the formulas. So this is the formula bar. Okay. And then our main Excel area where I have my columns and my rows, and the spreadsheet where I can begin my work. Enter data, enter labels, enter text, images, whatever I want to do based on the project itself. This is my workspace, or where I can use this space to perform calculations. Okay. All right, we talked about the scroll bars on the right side, and there's a bottom scroll bar also. On the bottom right corner, I have certain options such as zoom in, zoom out, which simply, if I click on the plus sign, it will increase the size of the cells. Okay. Easier to see sometimes. Similarly, if I click on the minus sign, it will zoom out. And I can also drag the zoom itself using my mouse, depending upon my own requirement. Next to the slider is the page break preview, page layout, and then normal. These are just different ways of viewing your spreadsheet. So right now I'm in my normal mode. If I click on the page layout, for example, this will take me to the page layout view. And the difference is visible on the screen. You can see the ruler comes up on the top, and also on the right I can add a header and so forth. And then my option of page break preview is helpful when I'm printing something. I only like to print certain areas of the spreadsheet. Okay. And again, we'll work with these in subsequent tutorials, but right now I just wanted to introduce the Excel interface so you know where things are located and each of these options what they can do for us. So I'm going to click on normal again. It takes me back to my normal spreadsheet. Okay. And since I navigated back from page preview, notice certain dotted lines in the background. You'll see these as being my margins also are displayed. Okay. All right, on the bottom left side of the corner are my sheet. So I'm right now on sheet 1. So this particular workbook contains one sheet at this point. If I need to add a next sheet, I can simply click on the plus sign here and it will add sheet 2. So now I have 2 sheets, sheet 1 and sheet 2. Obviously both are blank, and likewise I can add another sheet and so forth. So depending upon the project that I'm working with or my requirements, I can add pages to this workbook. And at the bottom here it says macros. This is the macro, and macro option is simply a small program, right, that allows you to record a series of steps. So many times when you're working on a project or any work and you're doing repetitive work, instead of doing it manually, we can create a macro and simply run it once and it will just execute all those steps automatically. Okay, so that's what that is. So just the basic Excel environment. The top right side just gives you the help feature is available, and then you can minimize the window, maximize the window, or close the Excel workbook. This arrow on the ribbon allows you to collapse the ribbon. So if you'd like to see a bigger area for your worksheet, you can click on the arrow that point upwards and it will hide the ribbon for you. So now you have more space. If you need to bring the ribbon back, simply click on the view menu and it will bring back the ribbon. And notice on the same position as earlier, instead of the arrow pointing upwards, it's now a pin. So which means you can pin the ribbon back if you'd like to permanently display it on your screen. So if I click on this option, now my ribbon is displayed. So I hope this helps. Just wanted to go over the Excel interface itself.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, do give us a thumbs up and share it. Also check out amazing discounts and offers on our premium courses in the description below.